Hello, I'm coming at you from my car. It is Friday, there's a lot of traffic, and I'm far from home. Rather than sit in my car, I'm going to record this. So here we go. I hope the sound is good. This is about moving into the world from just straight up ethics into ethics for musicians now. And one of the things that is the most powerful force, perhaps, working on the music industry is technology. So the question about this is, how is it changing your musical reality? And that's a question that's changing every day. Okay, the answer to that. So let's talk about the internet. Music and software is essentially free now. Should it be free? Is this freedom? So that's a complex question, and maybe there are going to be a lot more questions than answers. But just so you know, when I talk about before the internet, you will see these dinosaurs, because before the internet, there were dinosaurs everywhere, right? This is so far back in time that we can't even remember anymore. But there was a time before the internet, and many of the rules that you are subject to as musician, the rules, the laws, the way things go, were made before the internet. And so it kind of seems like people who lived with dinosaurs were making all this stuff happen, and that's where the rules come from sometimes. So when you see dinosaurs, you'll know. The corporate model of the record label was basically like this. Recordings are very expensive. Now, remind you, that's before the internet.
This route avoids congestion. You are on the fastest route. You will arrive at 8:31 p.m.
I'm not on the fastest route. Artists could not afford it, and labels would pay for the recording. Labels would take the money, but there was so much money coming in because everybody would pay for recordings, pay for recorded music, right? They were buying records, buying CDs, buying tapes. There's so much money coming in, everybody could get paid. The downside was that the record industry controlled everything, and the artists usually received less than 1% of the money that their music generated. So they were making a ton of money, but a bunch of business people were snatching that up, and the artists were not getting paid very well. But the thing is, there was so much money going around in music. Like, it was a huge economic boom for musicians, but there were some problems with it, because that money was only flowing for a few people, and in order to become a huge musician, you had to get these gatekeeper record label people to let you in. That might not be how it is now. All right, let's keep going. So the downside is that music was produced only in big studios, and if you didn't have that big studio sound, you weren't getting anywhere. So music distribution happens how? Like, how does music get from you to the people? Right now, you're going to say the internet, but remember, this is back in the day with no internet. How did people hear music? Radio, television, movies. Movies would always have soundtracks, and artists would try to get on the soundtrack, and then people would buy that CD. Like, I bought so many soundtracks because I'm like, oh, I like this one song and I can't get it anywhere else, so I'm going to buy the whole soundtrack. So you buy 17 songs, and then maybe you learn a new artist that you like. So there they are. You got music produced only in big studios. You have music distribution happening in radio, television, record stores, and films. There were fewer artists to choose from, music was expensive, and the radio wasn't free. It was controlled by the big labels. And it feels that way now here. If you turn on the radio here, it doesn't feel like freedom. It feels like radio is being controlled by, a couple of companies. There's not a lot of pirate radio here. So artists made the art, labels owned the means of production, and that's the way it worked. Means of production, remember this from Karl Marx thought. These are the factories, right? What are the means of production when it comes to music? Well, music being recorded, the first major thing that it got recorded on was a record, vinyl, big, huge record. It was also recorded on Studio 8, which is the 8-track, and it's like a giant tape. Those things are gone. And then they made cassette tapes. They're like little ones. Some people maybe even still have a car that has a tape deck in there, and you can get that tape with the wire that hangs off of it, so you can cram it in there and stick the jack into your phone, or into your we would put it into a CD player too. And then CDs are these big fat discs that have a little bit better sound quality than the cassette tapes, but they easily scratch, easily break, and they had decent sound, right? So beyond the CD, there were mini discs, but those didn't last very long. And rapidly, music became contained, as it is now, in ones and zeros. The thing that I find kind of crazy about this streaming revolution that's not really been fixed is that we're always listening to low quality audio. We're always listening to things that are just not very good. And when I listen to the super heavy metal, like the djent stuff, where they have the 8-string guitars, normally the bottom strings of those 8-string guitars, like, they didn't exist a few years ago because you didn't really have the speaker technology or the amplifier technology to make a low guitar string like that sound good. And it turns out we still don't if we run everything through that Spotify. Like, when I hear that kind of music on Spotify, those lower strings in the djent, they just sound very muddy and not very clear. But if you get it in like a higher quality, like a FLAC, F-L-A-C-K, free lossless audio something, codecs, I think, then it ends up sounding good. But you can't stream high quality files in 2020. How long are we going to have that problem? Probably 3 years, because when 5G comes and wraps around the world, Elon Musk's satellites get fired up, you're going to have ridiculously high quality audio without any interruption being streamed probably directly into your brain. So the means of production used to mean something because music wasn't streamed. How do you record now? You record on your computer, and you just need a couple of decent preamps. You can program a lot of these things. You can mix these things yourself. I'm sure you have a friend who's good enough to produce something that's studio quality, like good professional recording. You can do that yourself now. Back in the day, not only was it difficult to produce a recording, how do you get anyone to hear it? You would need to have it on a master, which would be like a gold CD, and this is right before the internet happened. It would be on a gold CD, and then you would use that gold CD to make other CDs. But even if you did have a CD burner, you have to stick it into the machine, burn the CD, wait for it to come out, have some sticker maker that you would stick some crappy sticker on there, and then the sticker's gonna fall off in somebody's car stereo, and then they're gonna hate you for it. So producing these CDs or these tapes was a big deal. So the record companies really had everybody because they owned the means of production. And that's like a Marxist thing. Owning the means of production is huge because it means you have the power to make stuff. All right. So, Jay-Z, we're going to talk about Jigga. You know Beyonce, right? Beyonce's Jay-Z's fan. I don't know if they're together anymore. She got mad at him on an album. But when I looked this up a little while ago, I looked up biggest musician in the world. And this is not the case anymore, but I loved this line here, and I felt like I needed to study like pretty much everybody on the list. So I studied almost everybody on the list and put them in the later stages of this class. But if you Google this now, it's going to be different. It's going to be a whole row of pictures of Justin Bieber, I think. So Jay-Z, what's up with him? He is now worth $520 million. How did he do that? That's 18 billion baht, and a billion is a million billion, right? Or 1,000 million. So 520,000 million, right? Or I'm sorry, 18,000 million. Way a lot of money. A whole lot of money, right? How did he become so rich and famous? Was it because he was super talented? I don't know. He's decent like, he's good. He's very good. He's very good. But like, there are definitely more talented rappers out there in every across every way of life. But the thing that was really amazing about him was the way that he was a businessman, and he explained the way that he was a businessman. So we got to go back a little bit and explain gangster rap a little bit. If you don't know what it is and you don't appreciate it, bear with us. And if you do know what it is, maybe you already know the roots of it. Like, if you listen to the words, you get the roots of it. And the roots are very dirty and criminal and violent, and there's a lot of like back and forth about whether gangster rap is good for, you know, the people who love it, because the things that it tells you to do are violent, and they might not be good for yourself. Might not be good for your community, but the place that it comes from is so real. Like, all these protests in the United States right now about police officers killing black people who don't have any weapons and aren't resisting them. It's not that they did it once. It's that they did it to this guy on camera in broad daylight around a bunch of people telling him not to do it. And it was just the last one. It was after these guys were quarantined from COVID for 3 months, and everything just erupted. But this has been going on for a long time. There's already songs about it too. So if we go back, you got American slavery. We went over colonialism before, so we gotta throw in some slavery. Black people who are in America, the majority of them were stolen from Africa and taken over to the United States, separated from their families, separated from anybody who speaks the same language as them, because otherwise they'd organize and revolt. And they were stuck with a bunch of people who they can't talk to, and they don't know, and they've never met before, and worked to death for hundreds of years. It was horrible. It was every bit as horrible as they say it is. Okay, I'll give you a video that explains it. So when we fought the Civil War and the North trounced the South because of Abraham Lincoln, the southern states seceded from the Union because they wanted to continue to have slaves, and the northern states were like, you guys got to stop having slaves. It's you know, it's the 19th century and we're really not that civilized yet. Come on. Even after this long, horrible, bloody war, when black people were freed as slaves, they were emancipated, but they were not really citizens. Like, there were laws that said that they were worth 3/5 of a human being. They were supposed to be given 40 acres and a mule, but really what ended up happening was they were just released. Like, now you're free. They don't have any money. They don't have any connections. They don't have any education. They don't have anything. They ended up doing the same work, but they were just getting paid a little bit of money. And these people, the white people who owned the means of production, the farms, were very upset that now they had to pay these people who they used to be taken care of for free. And they ended up in indentured servitude in a lot of ways. The ones who went to the city to work ended up finding themselves subject to Jim Crow laws. And Jim Crow laws is like separate but equal. Black people go to this school, and it's supposed to be separate but equal. But of course, the black school was not as good. There was different drinking fountains, different bathrooms, different swimming pools, different everything up until like recently. Like, there's a lot of people alive who lived through this, and saw it and have seen the world change, you know? Like, a lot of the world has changed, and a lot of the world has become better, but a lot of the world has not changed, and there's still a lot of this crazy racism thing going on. And Jim Crow is kind of shorthand for this way that they would be made to eat at different restaurants and sit in different movie theaters. And they were always, you know, you can imagine how bad they were. So slowly over time, activists started to say, I'm not sitting on the back of the bus. Take me to jail. Well, we're going to take you to jail. I know. Take me to jail. Well, we'll take you to jail. You already said that. Take me to jail, right? Rosa Parks is one who's famous for this.
Dr. Martin Luther King we'll have to get some of him in this course. But a lot of people said, no, we're not having this. This is ridiculous. And they fought in ways that were classy and brave and brilliant and amazing. And they fought against some really evil, stupid people. And they won in a lot of ways. I mean, the war's not over, but they won. They won rights. But when we get into like the late 90s, and this is right before the internet broke, right? All this stuff is still happening. And even though black people can vote, they still are getting pulled over by the police. And as late as like right around the late 90s, right when the internet was popping, they had stop and frisk. And frisk means like search you, check your pockets and stuff. And in New York City, and this is where Jay-Z was from. So in New York City, when police would just see black kids walking by, they'd pull them over, slam them up against the wall, and go through their pockets, looking to see if they had anything on them. And, a lot of white kids were walking around. They had things on them too, but they didn't get thrown against the wall and searched. So there was a lot of racist stuff going on. So all these ideas where black rappers are saying, bad things about the police, they had pretty much every right to be saying all of the horrible and violent things that they were saying about the police in their art. Because if they weren't doing it in the art, they were going to be doing it in the streets. So this art form was fueled by the fires of hundreds of years of racism. Okay, now let's keep going. So the present day struggle, you've seen, right? It's everybody in the United States is like on complete lockdown unless they're in the streets like going crazy and breaking stuff. Gangster rap is wound up in all of this, and it would be an interesting paper. So we'll keep going. Jay-Z, in his album The Blueprint, lays out his hustle. And I don't know if you know what this stuff is. It's not yaba, but it's really similar. This is crack cocaine. Regular cocaine is a powder that I notice that young Thai kids think it's high so. And just so you know, cocaine is sold on the black market by criminals, drug dealers, right? So like if these criminals want to make a little bit more money and they put a little bit of yaba in the cocaine and sell it, if you know that about them, what are you going to do? Tell the police? No, you're not going to tell the police, right? So cocaine is not pure. They've probably put some kind of cheap drug into there to make it more effective and more powerful. But whatever that other drug is in there is definitely not high so. So the likelihood that cocaine in Bangkok is high so is very, very low. It is almost 0%. There's probably yaba in there, so don't do cocaine. Crack cocaine is even worse than cocaine because it's been processed into these rocks and it makes it more powerful. It also makes it even more unhealthy for you and more addictive. People smoke these rocks in pipes and they have to heat them up like more than a regular flame will. So they'll turn these lighters up and they have to torch the heck out of this stuff and they breathe this in. It's much cheaper and people get really addicted to it. And Jay-Z made the majority of his money not rapping. He made it selling this really horrible drug, right? So on one half of the struggle, you see all these really terrible things happening. On the other half of the struggle, you see, really heavy drugs being sold by this guy who's supposed to be a hero. But let's judge him separately from this and bring it back to the means of production. So Jay-Z makes a ton of money. He came from nothing and he makes a ton of money selling crack cocaine. When he goes to make a record, they want to do what they do to everybody, and they want to give him 1% of the money, and they want to take 99% of the money because they own the means of production. Jay-Z negotiates with them because he's a businessman, and he says, how much is it going to cost to make this record? And they say, it's going to cost a lot. It's like a crazy amount of money. You got to pay for this, you got to pay for that, you got to pay for this, you got to pay for that. And he's like, send me the bill. I want to make all this stuff myself, and I want to take all the money. So he owned the means of production. And that is how he got so rich. And that is how he got Beyonce as a fan. And that is how he became such an amazing, cultural icon who everybody knows. He owned the means of production. So when he put his albums out, he made pretty much 100% of the project of the profits. So we'll come back to Jay-Z later. Steve Albini was a producer. He did, among other things, he did Nirvana, Nevermind, but he's one of the most famous and well-respected producers of all time. He's a genius. If you are a music technology person, read everything that he's ever written. Yeah, I'm gonna include this, but his article called "The Problem with Music" is amazing, and it talks about some young artists that were trying to get signed in the 90s, and some music industry person who had all the power telling them to swim through like a trench, like a clong full of poop. It says swim, 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 and they're swimming against each other, competing against each other, dunking each other's heads under the poopy water and coming towards the pen and the contract. And then in the end, one person gets to the end and he says, well, I think you probably need more development. So swim it again, this time do the backstroke, And so they just had so much power over these artists. Everybody wanted to get signed and be in a major label. And Steve Albini was somebody who worked for a lot of these major labels, and he thought that music was horribly run by these people. And Steve Albini's opinion is a strong opinion. He's a really great guy, and he produces excellent work. If you're a music technology person, read this article. He has a lot of good advice for people who are professional musicians, and he's a great guy. Okay. So now, fast internet is a human right? If your internet goes out, you're going crazy. How did we get here? And how long has music been free? Like, what is this world that we're in right now, and how is it built? Physical recorded music was on vinyl records. Stereo 8 was the 8 tracks, cassette tapes, compact discs, and then we get to MP3, M4A, etc., right? These new formats. What's the difference? Well, if I steal a CD and stuff it into my shirt, if I steal the Moron 5 CD, I used to make fun of them, but not anymore. Now I only make fun of Justin Bieber. Piracy, however, looks like this. This obviously looks like stealing. Like, for sure that this is stealing. You know it in your heart. But what about this? Is this stealing? Piracy. Yar, we are pirates. Joan Salad, if you have a salad, I will take your salad. I am Joan Salad. If you have 100 Justin Bieber CDs and I steal one Justin Bieber CD, you have 99 Justin Bieber CDs. But if I go on the interwebs and there are how many Justin Bieber CDs? It's an infinite amount, right? Well, if I just copy one and put it on my hard drive, then I just created something out of nothing, didn't I, right? Piracy as a crime is a little bit different from stealing produced recorded music that has been packaged and it's on a disc. Now, I remember this because I would let somebody borrow recorded music sometime. Like, hey, do you want to borrow my CD? Okay, borrow it and listen to it. But after a couple days, you're like, hey, how do you like that album? Isn't it good? And by the way, we used to listen to albums. Isn't it good? You like it? Oh, I haven't listened to it yet. Oh, you haven't listened to it yet? You better give me that back because I need it. Okay, thanks. Next time you borrow my CD, you best listen to it. Piracy, however, I can give this to you really instantly. There was like a couple of years where people would burn each other a CD. And I had a buddy who would do this for me all the time. He'd be like, oh man, there's this new band, blah, 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 blah. Let me burn it for you. Come on in. So I'd come in from the cold, we'd talk for a little while, he'd burn me a couple of CDs, send me home, I'd stick them in my car and blast that on the way home. That was the beginning of the future, but it was the beginning of the end for a lot of other things. So piracy is what we call this, and some people just call it file sharing. File sharing. I'm sharing a file with you, right? I have it, now you have it too. And that's what my buddy did when he would burn me CDs. I didn't have to get them back to him. He had them on his hard drive and he would burn me a CD. The first big one was Napster. I was in Hawaii with my good buddy, and rather than go around through Hawaii, when we found Napster, we were astonished. And we just started, I mean, the internet wasn't, we didn't know how to use the internet to search for anything yet. Like Google wasn't Google yet. So we would just be like, how do you can just log into this site and then you just type in the name of a band and then you just click on this thing and then it just starts coming onto your computer. And then you can, and then we had to take the extra step of burning it onto a CD, right? This is right around when CD burners were happening. So we were just burning CD after CD after CD after CD after CD off of Napster, because Napster just absolutely changed the world. It was, everybody was uploading all this music, and then everybody was downloading all this music, and we heard about a few people going to jail. We heard Metallica was very upset about this. Metallica was famously upset about all this, and people were making fun of them for it, but really, a lot of musicians lost a whole lot of money and it didn't come back. A lot of them had these recording careers in the early 90s or in the 80s, and they had these streams of money coming in, and they had, a house and they had a car payment, and they were living like wealthy people, and then their wealth just vanished because people stopped buying their CDs and started downloading them. But they were already past the point in their life where they want to be out touring all the time. They thought they had achieved their success through a legitimate career, and they could rest on these royalties pouring into their money. Royalties means the money you get paid for the music you record, right? Napster broke all of that. And I mean, I was right there stealing stuff. But we all continued to buy music. We just started consuming way more, right? But we all continued to buy music, for sure. The Pirate Bay is probably the most, famous for the past bunch of years. But Napster was maybe 2000. 1999, 2000 was Napster. And then the Pirate Bay is still happening. Kick-Ass Torrents a couple of years ago went down. But I think that they're still up. I have a slide about this. So piracy, the question is it still stealing if your computer does it? If I break into the Mac store and steal Logic Pro, is it the same as me going on the Pirate Bay and stealing Logic Pro from my computer? Up to you. Who agrees with this statement? Stealing is wrong. Who agrees with that? How Kantian do you want to be about this? Do you want to say stealing is always wrong every time? Stealing is categorically wrong. Stealing one time breaks our whole world. It's kind of true. So piracy, it's stealing. It's wrong, right? Well, Kick-Ass Torrents went down, and this was a couple of years ago. Somebody made a new one only 2 days later, and this was an article about that. Artem Vaulin was in Cambodia. I think he was in Ortris. Ortris is like a little Falang refuge. I went there and I saw almost no Cambodian people, and I saw no police, nothing like a police officer anywhere. And it was just an insane situation of just lots of debauchery. But there are petitions for his release from prison. And that's not something that you normally do with criminals. On the other hand, I don't know if you know Aaron Swartz, Aaronswartz. Aaron Swartz. He was an amazingly prolific programmer. He co-developed RSS. And RSS is an internet protocol, and I believe it's something that we use in order to get to blockchain. And blockchain is going to save the world. He was instrumental in the creation of Reddit. Reddit is better than any of the Mark Zuckerberg platforms. If you waste your time on Reddit, you're wasting your time better than you are if you're wasting it on Instagram. He helped start Creative Commons, Open Library, Watchdog.net, the Progressive Change Campaign Committee, founded Demand Process, founded the Stop Online Piracy Act, and founded the Protect IP Act, and he was 26 years old. People were always asking him how he managed to get so much done, and for a while he tried to impress them with his pearls of wisdom, but soon he just realized that he should give up because he doesn't feel like he does anything special. He worries about getting stuff done a lot, but mostly he just kind of does it. I thought that was really cool. He was in the Ivy League and he was downloading academic papers and just dumping them onto the internet. Like he had a login for, I think it's Harvard. It's either Harvard or MIT. You know, one of those two greatest schools that are right next to each other. And he stuck a laptop in a closet and he set it to just be constantly downloading academic papers and dumping them onto the internet because he's like, this information is powerful and it can really help people. There's no reason to pay for it. And the people who are producing this stuff don't get paid. It's just the people who own this strange machine that we use to protect it. And the universities have to pay, but there's no publication costs anymore. So who are we paying and why are we paying them? This information should be free. So he was a super information should be free pirate. Now, he killed himself when he was 26 years old via suicide because he was, for having that computer in the unlocked closet in this Ivy League school, they told him, you're going to go to jail for 30 years, 30 years. He was so stressed out by that. They gave him a plea bargain and they said, we're going to only put you in jail for 1 year. Like, this is a Harvard genius, changing the world of technology, idealist, like young, gentle soul. They're going to throw him into jail for a year. And he was like, no, I'm not doing that. And he killed himself. He hung himself in his apartment in New York. He might have been in grad school at NYU at this point, but I can't remember. Look him up. The story is really amazing. But that's Aaron Swartz, and he was like a super pirate. Okay, so piracy. Let's review what is this piracy thing. Do you think piracy is okay sometimes? Do you think it's okay when you do it, but it's not okay when other people do it? How about piracy is always wrong? It's categorically wrong. If we were together, I'd be asking you to raise your hands. Piracy it exists. Anything that you produce, you should expect to have pirated. Any company that you end up working for, you should expect piracy because it's just gonna happen. Piracy exists, right? So we could be very Kantian about this, and he was the guy with the categorical imperative who said that if one person does one thing bad one time, that's no good. Isn't that a hilarious picture of him? He's like, I'm Kant. But he's kind of right. Because what if everybody did this? Normally that just seems stupid. Like, what if everybody committed this crime? The thing about downloading music for free was that everybody did do it. Like, everybody did. Everyone, you know? And it did break the industry. It really did break the industry. So remember the categorical imperative? It's the idea that if it's okay for me to steal this one time, I might as well just throw that rule out the window. If it's okay for me to lie this one time, I'm just going to break language because there's no reason to believe in anybody. And it seems like Kant is just kind of going overboard and exaggerating usually. But in this case, when it comes to downloading music for free, he was right. Because it became a situation where it was so easy to do it. So few people were getting caught. And when people did get caught, everybody was very upset that a person got caught. we had just kind of flipped the industry over and said, no, we're all getting this for free now. So the record industry has lost power. I'm going to include this if you want to check it out, but it's going through some of the information about streaming sites. CDs and downloads have gradually become abandoned as streaming has become the platform of choice, and that's the world that we live in now. Is that we used to fill our hard drives with music, like in whatever way, by piracy or by buying stuff. We used to own recorded content that we were free to load onto our devices or not load onto our devices, but now people just pay for streaming services because you want to fill your devices up with video or photos, and people have less music on their devices. And I'm even there, just because I have a new device and I haven't taken the time to put my library is like a few upakan ago, right? And I haven't migrated these things over. So what's the downside to this amazing explosion of technology? Well, one thing that people point to usually, and this is artists that point to it, they'll point to saturation. And saturation basically means too many artists, right? There's too many damn artists. It's too easy to record now. Everybody can just go out and get a Focusrite Scarlett. You have two nice preamps, throw that into Logic Pro, and you're making a demo. You're already there, and you can master well enough to the point where you can put it on YouTube. You can put it, you can make your own recordings. That SSL2 Plus, that's a nice interface. I usually use that for recording these videos, and I could use it to record music and put that up. It'd be really easy. The barrier for entry has become very low, so it's easy for everybody to get out there. This is from another. This will be the third article. It's from a magazine called Metal Sucks, and this guy complains about various things that are not great about music and technology now. And one of them is that there are too many bands, there are too many artists, and that the bands that exist don't make money off of recordings anymore, so they must tour, and you can't tour now because of COVID-19, right? I guess you could tour Thailand, which I suggest doing before, touring goes away. So, what happens when there's too many artists? I think one of the things that you don't have anymore is like a religious love of your favorite artist. That's what you used to have, like a religious love of your favorite artist. Like people would sit and listen to music, and you can only afford so many CDs. Few people had more than 100 CDs. Most people had less than 30, right? And so you have 30 pieces of music that you can put on, and they're albums too. So unless you have like a 5 discs changer and you sit down and program these 5 discs to be, I want this, or you can set them on random or something, but you don't have a lot of playlists or anything like that. You kind of have to commit to an artist. And when you buy an album, you kind of have to listen to that album. If you want to listen to one song on repeat, you can listen to that one song on repeat. But if you're not skipping through stuff, people just would get lazy. And the default way of listening to things was albums. And so you've endured their boring stuff to get to the one that you actually like. And that was like a book reading way of consuming music, was consuming albums. So old people, like even older millennials, Generation X people, boomers, listen to albums, but people who are younger don't listen to albums because it's just a different way of consuming music. What do you think of albums? I'd like to hear that in the comments. So the corporate music industry used to stop market saturation. And one of the ways that they would do this, if they have a band that's like Chan Kitting Tu, and then they're like, okay, we're going to sell this Chan Kitting Tu band, they would go out and they would find every other band that was like Chan Kitting Tu, and they would be like, do you want to be on our label? And then they'd sign them. But for the one Chan Kitting To band, they'd spend a crazy amount of money. They'd make their recording sound amazing. They'd get them on every radio station, all day, every day. Beautiful music videos. They'd be 50 feet high on every billboard. You'd see them everywhere. You'd fall in love with them. You'd buy their music. And then they'd sign all these other bands and they would shelf them. They'd put them on the shelf. They'd spend a tiny little bit of money on their recording. They'd spend a tiny little money on their promotion, and they would hide them from the world so that there wouldn't be saturation. Because if you want to listen to some Chan Kitting To music, you just listen to this band called Chan Luk To, and they Chan Kitting To the best, you know, because all these other Chan Kitting To bands, they're like hiding in a closet. It was a technique that a lot of record labels would use in order to stop competition. Another thing is, if your band was really weird and the A&R people couldn't see the promise, they'd just ignore you. And then if you couldn't get a major label to listen to you, you were never going anywhere, because what are you going to do? You're going to make your own recording and then just give it to people? Good luck with that. And a lot of people did do that, but it takes a bunch of time away from being an artist. Okay. If your band is too weird, don't let them be heard. A band is competing with your band, sign them and put them on a shelf. And that's what happened to a lot of bands. They were killed intentionally because they sounded too much like the main band that a major label was pushing. But now we don't have this. Anybody can get out there, but we have saturation. So which one do you like better? Do you like the saturation, or do you like having these big corporate gatekeepers cleaning up the music industry? We don't invest in music now. That's one thing we don't do. I pay for Spotify. It costs 5 baht every day. That's as much as Lactosoy. So if I was drinking Lactosoy every day, 5 baht. It's nothing, right? It's nothing. It's so nothing. Back in the day, everybody had one of these, and you see a couple of those are burned CDs, but everybody had these. The CDs were like 500 baht each. If you had 50 CDs, that's 25,000 baht for this thing. And a lot of times somebody's car would get broken into, and then their CDs would get stolen, and they would cry and cry and cry because they were not getting them back, and they didn't have 25,000 baht. They wouldn't cry for the broken window on their car. They would cry for the CDs because these things were so near and dear to them. And what are they going to do? Listen to the radio? The radio's full of a bunch of garbage. You know, they didn't choose that stuff. There's no Spotify. There's no YouTube. You can't pick any music. So people would be like, oh man, I'm so sorry. Do you want to borrow a couple of mine? And it was hilarious, man. It was just crazy to me. And we used to call these the Bible. The Bible. Did you bring your Bible? And the Bible is the main religious text of Christianity. Christianity is the main religion of America. So you could see how much we cared about these things. We really cared about these things. Mine was twice as big as that. It had 4 CDs on every page. And I probably had hundreds. I had hundreds. I'd spend like all my money on recorded music. Not all of it, but I spent a lot of money on recorded music. The Rage Against the Machine, the first album, I bought that like 4 or 5 times because it kept getting scratched and warmed out. And it was awesome. That's the one that has the Vietnamese monk setting himself on fire. They were so hardcore. So what? What has improved? This is an interview with Mr. Steve Albini, and he wrote that piece back in 1993. So 20 years later, he wrote an article saying that the internet solved all the problems that he had with music. He said, the industry as it was then was dominated by the big labels and the bloated middlemen who exploited the music of generally poorly paid musicians, resulting in a lack of choice for consumers, end quote. Now, he says, quote, I see more bands and I hear more music than ever before in my life. There are more gigs, more songs available than ever before. Bands are being treated with more respect and are more in control of their careers and destinies. That's 2014, Steve Albini. The same guy who said that in 1993, artists were swimming through shit. That means that the world that we're in right now, according to this guy, Steve Albini, is much better. And it's because of the internet, even though it gives us the saturation, even though it gives us these problems. So what do you think? There are other ways to make money. And I grabbed this. The album was okay, but the thing that was interesting to me was the way that they had tried to find a way to sell to super fans, right? This is some gent band, and they sell a producer pack for much, much more money. And look at some of the things they sell. They sell all the single separated raw tracks for you to practice mixing, and you can put, whatever on it. You can remix the album if you really love it. Complete DI tracks to all the guitars, so you can strip all of the effects off of them and listen to what they're really doing. A huge choice of guitar and bass reamps. Pre-mixed stems to be used for covers, playthroughs, remixes, and that's really smart for them, because then people who are really big fans of them will be doing covers on YouTube, and it's kind of authorizing people to cover your music, which means that you're going to get more views to your brand. They use the Axe effects. Of course, I think probably 40 people who are listening to this know what Axe Effects is. It's a digital guitar amplifier. It's like the best digital guitar amplifier that was ever made. It kind of means you don't need any more amplifiers anymore. There's a PDF about the way that they mix things. There's a bunch of videos. It's really interesting. Guitar tablature, lyrics. So instead of being like a secretive artist that's hiding and you need to work so hard to find them, they're kind of putting more of themselves out there. And you can argue about whether that's good or bad, but it just is what it is. The market is demanding that artists share more, and you are then able to charge more than just the same standard album for like super fans, right? BNK48 figures out how to make money off their super fans, right? So real bands can do it too. So is this increased democracy? What do you think? Recording technology is cheap. Social networks provide direct access to fans. The internet can give everyone the greatest music in the world right now. You could all be listening to Justin Bieber right now. Everyone wins, right? This is a utopia. This is a much better world. Isn't that right? Listen to what your heart is saying. Like, what do you really think? What do you really think about this? That's what that Google Classroom forum is like. As much as I would love to be in a real class with you, I love the fact that you are forced to comment on this. So, if you believe in private property, do you agree with file sharing? Right? Should our music be free? Should your music be free? According to a utilitarianism, what is it? Oh my God. Utilitarianism is the greatest good for the greatest number of people, right? According to a utilitarianism, should music be free? You can't just write a yes or no answer to that for your answer to the Google Classroom. You got to write more, okay? But if you don't know, you got to look on the forums and see who you think is smart and see who said it. The music is free now, man. Is this freedom? Is this freedom? Up to you. So, bonus. This is another thing if you are still looking for your paper. Environment conditions art, right? The possibility for new kinds of music has a lot to do with technology. We realize the possibilities in new technologies and we reach for their limits, right? I mean, think about the piano. The piano made it possible for a composer to tell everyone to leave him the heck alone. And if you wanted to hear how something sounds, you have the piano to do that. Think about composers without a piano. Or without a MacBook Pro or a piano. You have to go get a choir together and be like, sing this part for me. I want to hear how it sounds, right? So as technology moves along, our possibilities change. And two of the most recent forms of music that have come out are dubstep and djent, right? And they both like rely on speaker technology and amplifier technology to get bass sounds to be more articulate and more detailed, because before it would just sound like farting, you know, like those lower frequencies. But both dubstep and djent, they make the lower registers sound very detailed and nuanced and beautiful. And they do a lot with the ability of new speaker technology and just basically new tech, the ability to make bass sound much more clear. Hard rock is one that I remember just from playing like rock and metal and stuff like that. People couldn't hear the vocals. And so all the stuff that I was doing was all like, I wanted to make things repetitive, because the first few sets of songs that I wrote were just like insanely poetic and nerdy and personal, but no one had any idea what I was saying. And so like people who I'd talk to afterwards, they're like, I want your lyrics, like I want them on paper. And sometimes I'd like tell them, but there's no like way of getting subtitles into the room when you're performing live. So the batch of songs that I wrote, that I recorded, there was a lot of repetition in the vocals, because if I repeated the vocals a lot with like a lot of somsat, like repetition, then the people in the room, by the end, they'd know what the words of the song were. So the room, just the way it was and the bad sound, made me change the way that I was writing personally. Like I've lived through this. So what's going on in your world when you make music? How is your environment changing the way that you create art? And wouldn't your art be totally different if the world was different? If the world that you were creating art in is different? I mean, we've just had pandemic conditions for 4 months, and we have it better than everybody else. Like, imagine what it's like in these other countries. So that's the last question. And now I'm tired and I'm gonna drive. But I really appreciate the things that you've been writing, and I hope that this lecture inspires you, because we are finally out of the ancient ideas and we're into the future. We're gonna talk about this kind of stuff for the next few weeks. I look forward to your comments. Peace.